Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker.
And me, DB Fastbinder. And boy, I didn't have the best day personally, but definitely had a better day than George Miller had a weekend.
Yes. Ooh, man. Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, if you're new, or if you're returning, welcome back. If you're new, what we usually do is we do a series of reviews. We'll do something new or new-ish, something kind of something classic or old. Occasionally, one or both of us will have solo things that we want to review. But before we get into all of that, as DB alluded to earlier, box office.
Box office. And so I don't know who thought that greenlighting a Furiosa movie with a bigger budget than the previous Mad Max movie was a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know either. Somebody at Warner Brothers.
Because, I've been seeing all sorts of, frankly, autistic arguments about it this week.
Yeah.
From people I respect. You basically have one side that's kind of where the most obnoxious members of it are going. Everyone's so used to it being a girl boss that they just stayed away in droves. And then you have what I'm going to call sensible people. Uh, so I'm trying to think of how many successful prequels there have really been in Hollywood history. You've got the Star Wars prequels, of
Yeah.
course.
Star Wars.
Rogue One.
Rogue One. The Hobbit trilogy was moderately successful.
It was financially successful, as I recall.
Yeah, creatively, it's
Right, we are
debatable.
strictly talking people putting butts in seats.
Right? Yeah, yeah,
Um, Solo famously bombed. Wonka was pretty good, as like it did well in the box office.
yeah.
Um, but there aren't a whole lot of really huge movies that are technically prequels.
True. Yeah.
I think that's because outside of Star Wars, and Star Wars, I think had that built-in interest just because one, the prequels moved digital technology ahead,
Hmm.
and two, the fact that the other episodes had always been called 4, 5, and 6 made them feel less like a tacked on prequel.
Right. Yeah.
There was just some inherent interest in knowing, but what are 1 and 2 and 3 about?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And of course with Rogue One, I mean that was basically filling in a plot hole from the original movie about why would they build such an obvious weakness in the Death Star.
See, I don't even necessarily want to call that a plot hole just because, having worked in my job for as many years as I have, everything is going to have some sort of structural problem uh, or flaw.
True. Yeah.
Like you got to vent that space gas somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frankly, it's impressive that they could get down to the size of a womp rat.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I see what you mean. It's a moment that people would find inherently interesting, and they did some interesting things with. Like I still say with Rogue One, the thing I took away from it the most was just the sheer menace of the Death Star, like the way it filled the sky in a way that they never had the special effects to do before.
Right. Yeah.
But getting back to our actual number one movie, which
Hmm.
very nearly lost out. From all accounts, Furiosa sounds like a perfectly fine movie. I actually considered going last night to give it a watch just to see. But as I sat there, I said to myself, okay, so this thing is more than 2 hours long.
Hmm.
I hear it has a slow opening act. Um, I'm kind of tired of post-apocalyptic as a
Yeah.
genre
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's a lot of it.
Mhm.
And I do not remember Furiosa leaving much of an impact on me in the previous Mad Max movie.
Yeah, I didn't like the character as much as everybody else who watched that movie seemed to like her.
I was honestly unaware that she had a fan base. Like, almost 10 years later, my memory of it is, oh yeah, it's that other character who was there with Max. And honestly, in that movie, I couldn't even tell you a bunch of distinctive things that Max did.
He really didn't do that much. Yeah,
No, and I remember some of the set pieces. I remember some of the visuals, and I remember Immortan Joe being kind of cool, but
yeah,
that is basically the entirety of my memory of the movie.
yeah. Same here. Yeah, which one was Morton Joe the big bad guy?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I remember the one guy, the witness me.
Oh yeah. And I remember like the spray paint like mm, um, trucker meth that they used to hype themselves up.
Yeah, and Max had what's the universal donor blood? O negative.
Man, I didn't even remember that.
I remember that. Yeah, that's the only other thing I remember for them. That's why they wanted him, because he had he was universal donor, so they could
Oh,
get his
okay.
blood. Yeah,
But yeah, and as we're talking about prequels, again, Han Solo was a bomb.
yeah,
So it's like if you're going to make a prequel movie, there is an audience for it, but you have to scale the movie to the audience.
right.
Although
Yeah.
I'm curious. Nope, not.
Oh, not that Solo. Solo, a Star Wars story. Yeah.
Think harder, man. I gotta say, whoever's in charge of the servers over at the numbers, gotta
Yeah.
step up your game a bit. Yeah, $213 or yeah, 213 million domestic, gross just under 400 million. Uh, Furiosa is not going to hit that
No.
because 26 million. That is not 26 million domestic. That is not people seeing it and then saying to stay away. This is people just inherently going, "What's a Furiosa?"
Yeah.
Because it's been almost 10 years.
Hmm.
And if you had asked me before I heard this movie was coming out, hey, what was the name of Charlize Theron's movie, or Charlize Theron's character from the last Mad Max movie? I might have remembered it, but
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's not even her playing the character. It's Anya Taylor Joy.
right, which makes sense because it's a prequel. So you almost wonder if they've been better off with a sequel.
Yeah.
I think this is just a case of the author really wanted to, like, George Miller just really liked this character in this setting. I'm sure that all of this backstory was written up in advance for the previous movie, and he wanted to see it realized. And well, he got to see it realized.
Yeah.
So good on him.
Yeah. Yeah. I can understand that. I mean, that's kind of how Angel's Awakening came about. So, I've, you know, good on him for doing it, but it didn't make the cash that they were hoping it would.
Now, meanwhile, we have the other end of the spectrum, which is cheap kid-directed movie that's probably already in the black because of distribution deals.
Mhm.
Sony's The Garfield movie.
Yeah, which I'm interested in seeing, because I've had a soft spot for Garfield for pretty much my whole life.
Yeah, though without Lorenzo music, it just isn't the same.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But I mean, that one isn't a huge box office draw either, but it had a budget that was about a third as big as Furiosa, so
Hmm.
it's doing fine. It's hard to compare the international box office on it because it released in a few territories before the US, but
Yeah.
still, I mean, it sounds like it's just kind of harmless kids entertainment.
Yeah.
Nothing especially great, just
Yeah.
not
Chris
wonderful.
Pratt voicing Garfield. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris Pratt kind of becoming the oh, who's the guy who was the Mandalorian?
Oh, Pedro Pascal.
He's the yeah, he's becoming the Pedro Pascal of animated movies
Yeah,
in the sense that he's casted too many things.
yeah,
Like Chris Pratt and Pedro are both actors who are really suited to certain types of characters, and they just must have amazing agents.
yeah. Or the studios realize that, like, well, I really don't know who else to cast for this. Oh, let's just get one of them.
Yeah, I mean they got name recognition. People show up for them, so I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of people who are casted too many things, if with
Uh,
Ryan Reynolds,
yeah,
it had a pretty bad opening weekend. 52% drop week over week is tolerable.
yeah, but it did. Yeah, but unfortunately, it only did like 30 million its opening weekend, so that's not a great thing.
Yeah, though. Okay, this is interesting. It looks like it's kind of developing some longer legs here.
Hmm.
I've been hearing some good things about it actually,
Yeah,
which I wasn't expecting.
yeah, yeah. Given some of the reviews we've been hearing from it.
Yeah, another YouTuber I follow recommended a video that was making him thinking about go to. Go, it was making him. I've had a long week, folks. It was making him think about going to see it.
Uh,
And I did generally respect his opinion about family-friendly entertainment. Now, mind you, this is a guy who he is a foster dad, and he just has a large natural family too. So he has a range of kids he can take with him to any movie.
yeah.
That it's like ranges from like what 4 or 5 to 13 or so.
Hmm.
So the guy's a walking sample size.
Yeah.
So he's very well dialed in on what makes for good kids entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Coming in fourth, we got Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which lower end of the projection.
Yeah.
And rounding out the top five, we got The Fall Guy, which you know,
Yeah.
it's still exists.
Yeah. It's still in theaters despite it being available to buy digitally.
Which you know that Universal isn't getting as much of that take as they would otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm seriously curious how much they actually make off of direct to consumer stuff because
Mhm.
I've looked over a couple of financial statements and they never really break that out
Yeah.
because it's got to be worth some because I can kind of see the logic of cutting down your box office take if you go, well, we kind of have some residual knowledge of the movie from advertising for the box office release. It's like there's probably some sort of bean counting going. Well, if we only get 30% back in the back half of the run, then but we sell X times more uh, digital copies, it makes up for that. And
Yeah.
Hollywood accounting is always voodoo anyway. But
Yeah. Hell yeah.
the other major release here is we have Sight from Angel Studios, which is about a surgeon who, well, restores people's sight.
Yep.
Uh, I don't know that it's necessarily explicitly a religious movie. I haven't seen any signs of it. It just seems like it's one of those heartwarming true story movies.
Yeah. Mm. Did almost 2.8 million in 21 theaters. Pretty good.
Yeah, 2100.
2100.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For a minor studio like that, that's not amazing. But I also would assume that Angel Studios has the sense not to put too much money into these things,
No. Yeah. Yeah.
unless, of course, they're just bleeding their Sound of Freedom pile.
Yeah. 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 Hopefully they got the people in charge of the budgets on their movies are more competent than at Disney or
Warner Brothers for that matter.
or
Yeah.
oh yeah, Warner Brothers, yeah, Universal.
Yeah. So aside from that, I don't think there's a whole lot of interesting things to talk about
Mhm,
in terms of the micro. But so we're at June. The year is just about half over.
mhm.
And if we take a look at the box office for 2024 domestic, um, well, first off, this trend line for the opening of the year was just kind of yeah, pathetic.
Yeah.
We're finally within the expected range, but wait, no, that's the estimated 50 weeks. Where are we right now? We're about here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I decided to look into it a little bit. So our top grossing domestic movie of the year was Dune Part 2, followed by Godzilla X Kong, Kung Fu Panda, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Um, except for Dune Part 2 and Godzilla X Kong, none of those were really seen as huge successes.
Yeah. Yeah, especially Ghostbusters and the Fall Guy. They're at number 8.
Yeah, and Wonka and Migration, numbers 7 and 9 respectively, those were holdovers from late December.
Yeah.
And Migration was kind of a flop.
Yes.
And then I took a look at the biggest weekends. Famous mega bomb The Flash would have been number 5 this year if it had released with a 50 million opening like it had.
Ooh.
And let's do some more mean comparisons. I'm curious, what did the Marvels open up to?
Oh god, that was dismal.
Uh, Opening weekend 46 million. The Marvels would have been number 6 here.
Oh wow. The Marvels did better than Furiosa. Oh.
And Ghostbusters.
Oh. Jeez. Okay.
Uh,
What did Madam Web do?
well, Madam Web was 2024.
Oh, that what it was. Yeah. Okay.
And as you can see, it is rightly not on the top 10 here.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. What else came out last year that was a huge mega bomb? Ant-Man
Oh yeah.
3. The numbers is bogging down.
Yeah.
Is Ant-Man one word or 2 words, according to them?
I think it's hyphened like Spider-Man. Well, where are you looking at that one? I got another one. Indiana Jones.
Oh, how did that do?
Well, let's see. Dial of Destiny.
Yeah, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania opened with 120 million over a 4-day weekend.
Ooh.
That would have made it the number 1 movie of this year.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so Indiana Jones opening weekend did 60 million.
So that would have been good enough to make it would have been number 3 for the year.
Wow.
But did you say 56 million or 60 million?
60.
Yeah, 60. Yeah, it would have been number 3 ahead of
Wow.
Planet of the Apes. So Hollywood, I think you might need some more movies to put out and
Yeah.
keep your budgets under control and maybe make some good ones.
Yeah.
Because
Well, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
What kind of seems like has happened is that you burned up a lot of goodwill last year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And well, I'm sure Disney is really hoping that Deadpool and Wolverine makes $1 billion.
Heck, I don't know that's going to do that.
I don't
Just
think so
because it
either.
is R rated.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to hit 800 million. Is my
Yeah.
personal opinion.
Yeah. I think 700, 800. Yeah, somewhere around in there. Yeah, because like I think Joker is the only R-rated movie that's ever done a billion, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
That
And that
sounds right.
I would say the only reason that did a billion was because there was a lot of controversy around it.
It definitely helped,
Yeah.
which is funny.
Mm.
But well, so I don't really have a solution to the problem. All I can just
Yeah.
do is point out this problem, and I had not expected these results, but I had this intuitive sense. Didn't Black Adam open to 80 million?
I think so. Yeah.
And that was the one that everyone went, "Oh, that didn't do too well." Oh, 67 million.
So, okay.
Still good enough for third place
Yeah.
this year. Like last year again was the year of the flopbuster. This is the year of the I don't know, the wet fart, the leftovers.
Yeah.
Don't know what else to call it.
Yeah.
Eh,
Man.
It's it's enough to make a movie executive mad, mad to the maximum.
Yes.
Might even make them Mad Max.
And yeah.
So we decided. Speaking of Furiosa, we decided that since I had never actually seen this movie, that we would give it a shot.
Yeah.
And the my experience with this series was the only one I had ever seen was Fury Road,
Yeah.
which I'm mostly happy because someone invited me to one of those nice Cinebar theaters where it's like the restaurant slash bar,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's what was playing.
Oh, yeah. Kind of like a Alamo Draft House type place.
Yep.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I had seen this movie, Thunderdome and Fury Road. I still have not seen the very first Mad Max yet. So that's my experience with it, and my overall impression is just, yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. I will say that Tom Hardy actually doesn't look too dissimilar from a young Mel Gibson.
Yeah,
So that was actually better casting than I thought it was.
yeah. I mean, despite the fact that he didn't really have a whole lot of lines in that movie, but I mean, he was decent enough. Yeah,
Right. I mean, technically, it seems like over the weekend we got the second Furiosa movie
right. Yeah,
to an extent.
yeah,
But then again, well, okay, so to kind of set the stage here, we usually talk about the plot of a movie, but this movie has a very simplistic plot. In fact, I
mhm,
would say this is a story that if you cut down some of the action scenes, could have been a 30-minute episode of a ongoing show about the Road Warrior.
yeah, yeah. It could have been like like an anthological series. Yeah, which, now that I think about it, I mean, the Mad Max movies are very anthological. You know,
Right. Never in the same place twice, never the same supporting cast twice.
yeah.
As I recall, the first Mad Max movie even takes place before the nuclear war.
Probably, yeah. I I don't know. That probably would make sense. Yeah,
That's what I recall from reviews. Like it's a society is starting to break down, but it hasn't fully collapsed.
yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, because I've seen some clips from it, and like he's living in a house with a wife and kids, so that's probably likely. Yeah,
Yep.
and then yeah, because yeah, so like the plot of the movie is that the uh the world, there was a, a global cataclysm. I'm assuming it's there's an opening vignette of different clips showing different like news footage. So it's presumed that that the Cold War turned into a hot war,
Well,
and
and the gas ran out.
gas ran out, and so then you got a little bit of Max's backstory, I think the reason they did that was because in the first Mad Max movie hadn't been released in the U.S. when this movie
Mhm.
came out.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's why this movie was called The Road Warrior instead of Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior, because here in America we'd be like, well, who the heck's Mad Max? What is this? What's this movie all about? And so they had to add in that little vignette at the beginning so that people know who he was, know who Mad Max is. And Max is basically he's in his old cop car, yeah, with his dog, and just kind of driving around, and he tries to get gasoline whenever he can, because as DB pointed out, there's no gasoline, there's a gas shortage or scarcity. And he's got this gang of what would you call them, outlaws, or
Yeah,
yeah,
outlaws. It,
yeah,
they would actually, you almost want to call them mutants, but that there doesn't seem to be any sort of actual superhumanness or supernaturalness outside
no.
of Max surviving a couple of crashes that seem a little bit dubious.
Yeah.
Uh,
um yeah.
For that matter, or actually, no, the dog is the real mutant, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, yeah. uh so um so Max has a little encounter with some of them, and then he has a run in with he sees like a little gyro copter thing, and he meets the guy, the we just call him he's just called the gyro captain.
Yep, played by Bruce Spence, and probably my favorite performance in the movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. um Yeah, I've seen him in other like movies and shows. He's a really good character actor. He's really tall. Part
Hmm.
of it part of it fits with the distinction of him is that I think he's like 6'8" or 6'9" or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a real nut bar because he's obsessed with snakes. He trains the snakes. He eats the snakes.
yeah. Yeah. So he tries to trap Max, but then Max turns the tables on him, and then but then the gyro captain tells him, "Oh, there's this place where there's just a whole lot of gasoline, and I'll take you there if you don't kill me." And he's like, "All right, sure." And so they find this like kind of like a little village enclave, like compound, that's got a oil tanker in it. And of course, they're being the people in this compound are being harassed by the same gang of outlaws that were going after Max earlier, and they're led by a guy wearing a metal hockey mask, and
In
as
bondage gear.
in
Yeah,
bondage gear. Yeah, well, they're all wearing bondage gear, but he calls himself the Lord Humongous.
the humongous.
The
Uh,
Humongous.
I forget the actual lines, but it's like, all who oppose me will die.
Yeah,
He talks to that exact sort of cadence,
yeah.
even though he should realistically sound like,
Yeah. Well, I think he did sound like that when they were filming it, and then they just ADR'd in his voice
oh,
later.
oh man, if they hadn't had to do that, I would have been shocked.
Yeah.
But
uh, yeah,
it's interesting because he runs this gang like he's a little petty lord. Like he has a guy who's almost his major domo.
yeah.
He makes decrees. Uh, you wonder what they're eating because the dude is ripped, so he's got to be pounding a lot of protein.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, he's just walk away.
Yeah, he's great. So again, like we said earlier, if you'd cut down some of the action scenes and maybe a couple of complications, you could probably fit the overall plot to this in a 30-minute episode, maybe an hour-long episode of a TV show.
Yeah.
Is it?
Um,
Because you have these big elaborate car chase scenes all over the place. And I will say, having seen Fury Road first, th- this comes across as oh, Fury Road is what George Miller had in his head while he was filming these.
yeah. Yeah. Fury Road was what he wanted to do, or uh, um, What Fury Road was what he wanted Road Warrior to be if he had more money.
Right. And so I'd say like the hallmark of this movie are the elaborate grungy chase scenes. And by grungy, ramshackle vehicles, they're like cars that have been heavily modified using swapped parts. Everyone's dressed in cast off clothes that you almost wonder if there was like a some sort of weird boutique that was the last place that wasn't nuked that had that particular style of clothes in it, because almost everyone is dressed like that.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. And so the people in this compound, they're trying to get out with the gasoline,
Yep.
but they don't have a vehicle that can haul the tanker. But then Max remembers there was a truck rig that could haul it, so he makes a deal with them that, hey, if I get this for you, you give me as much gasoline as I need, and they agree to it. And of course, you got one of the early car chases in there, um, and then they want, of course, then the people in the compound want Max to help them actually drive the truck for them.
He's like, I don't recall that being part of the deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and so then he you get a little there's like one little moment in there of drama where the leader of this group is like, oh, he said, what, why do you keep, why do you want to live like this, what happened in your past, and then he figures that, oh, okay, you lost somebody, you lost family, and yeah, he did, he lost his wife and kid, and so yeah, so he just roams around, and he doing the wandering nomad thing, and
Yep. His only companion being his old Australian sheepdog.
yes.
And then, Max drives off with the sheepdog, and show's over because everything was okay, and the dog definitely didn't die.
Yeah.
Intentionally shot by one of the guy's crossbows.
Yeah, yeah. And Max didn't blow his car up.
Yeah. That was the implausible crash. Not so much implausible that Max himself survived that, because he was really beat up and he actually had a scar that he carried on into the next movie,
Yeah.
according to Daniel. But
Yeah.
the dog was completely unscathed, even though the dog was not buckled in at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Realistically, the dog should have been just as banged up as him, but that wouldn't have. It's hard to make a dog act injured like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And actually injuring a dog like that, well, you might actually have the Humane Society go after you the same way that Max decides to stick it to the humongous.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so he gets rescued. He gets rescued by the gyro captain, I believe.
Yep. And Jar Captain flies him back to the compound. He agrees that he's going to drive their tanker.
Mhm.
And there is a twist ending that is kind of spoiled midway through the chase, if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
Do we want to say what the spoilers?
This movie's over 40 years old. Yeah.
Okay, you
Go
know
ahead.
what? Here is your chance to back out if you don't want to hear it. Yeah,
Yeah.
Max was the decoy. Max
Yeah.
and everyone on that vehicle was the decoy.
Yeah, the tanker was filled with sand, and as DB mentioned, during the chase, the bottom of it got damaged, and you could actually see sand coming out of the bottom.
And I actually kind of gaslit myself, going like, "Well, is that just what gasoline kind of looks like when it's spraying out or yeah, like dribbling out and going into the wind and being dispersed like that? Like, that kind
Yeah,
of looks like sand, but why would the tanker be full of sand?"
yeah,
She goes to show what I know, that yeah, that was just sand.
yeah, yeah. And the actual gasoline was in a bunch of drums and barrels in a school bus.
Right? They just stacked up all their vehicles with as much gas as they could carry, and they went north.
Yeah,
And you find out that the narrator. We didn't really mention this character.
yeah,
Honestly, the characters in this movie are incredibly simple,
yeah,
but one of them is this little feral boy.
yeah.
It was
with his
actually called The Feral Kid in the on IMDb.
yeah, and his weapon of choice is a boomerang.
A very
Um,
sharp boomerang, and he actually has like a little glove that he uses to catch it safely.
yeah, yeah, and in the famous scene in the movie when the humongous is giving his speech, the boy throws it at the guy on the right there with the mohawk. Wes is the character's name. He has a little he has a whatever you want to call him, F boy, um, that gets killed by the feral boy's boomerang, and that's when you have the whole no losers wait, losers wait.
Yeah. So I would say the overall verdict of this thing is, from a world building perspective, this is amazingly done for what I'm sure was a tiny budget.
Mhm.
It feels very, to use a term I hear everyone use all the time, lived in. It's like all the weird tech, all the weird like jumbled together tech feels very authentic,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's kind of neat just watching a little bit of how some of the characters day to day works. I also like little details at the compound. They just have. No, was it the compound or was it at? Did they? So I forget. I remember that there was like a. It almost looked like there was a different base they were looking out over, or was it the same base?
it was the same one. Yeah,
Okay, so yeah, so I kind of like the detail that it's the Australian outback. There are a whole bunch of feral camels out there, and the townspeople had captured a camel and had it in a pen.
mm, yeah,
Because, like, you know what? In a desert environment, camel milk is apparently actually really good.
mm.
So, or at least I should say, it is a resource you can use.
Yes, yeah. If you're desperate enough, yeah,
But now, as far as characterization goes and acting goes, these are a bunch of very simple characters.
yeah, yeah. Even Max is very simple. Yeah.
Right. He definitely is. One thing I've noticed with a lot of newer writing, and this is a plus and a minus, I find myself in kind of the newer phase of writing where I want to make every character have more depth and time to develop.
Mhm.
But the characters in this movie, they all work. It's just that you don't know all that many details about them, but you can infer a lot. So
Yeah.
it's very economical that way.
Mhm.
It would rather use that time on car chases.
Yeah. Yeah, and the car chases, it was pretty obvious that the technique that Miller used, which was the cars were probably going at at like a normal speed, but he sped the frame rate up to make them look like they were going a lot faster.
Right. There's a couple of times where he applies that to humans and it looks a little bit goofy.
Yeah, and I thought James Cameron did a better job with that in Terminator.
Well, I will say I didn't really even notice the technique being used in Terminator, so
Uh,
that itself is a is evidence of your claim.
yeah,
But overall, I would say this was a pretty good time.
yeah.
After watching it, the maker of Fist of the North Star needs to be paying some royalties to Mr. Miller. I hadn't realized just like I'd heard people say for years that Fist of the North Star was based on Mad Max. I had not realized just how based on Mad Max it was from the smattering of episodes and clips I've seen over the years.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and when I watched after I finally watched this movie for the first time, I'm like, okay, all those South Park references finally started making sense.
Yeah. The other thing I thought was kind of interesting is that at this point the post-apocalyptic genre is so well established that
Mhm.
a introductory speech like what they had at the start of the movie would be wholly unnecessary because everybody can figure out just very quickly, oh, this is post-apocalyptic because XYZ.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. But
In fact, even at the time, you might have been able to get away with it, though it was early stages of the genre. Um,
yeah, yeah, I can't think of too many movies that were like this that came out in the late like 70s or in early 80s.
though you know the secret of where post-apocalyptic and cyberpunk came from, right?
Um, where did it come from?
I should say at least the visual look of it, because it's cheap to make.
Ah,
That's actually a recurring thing in a lot of classic sci-fi, where it's kind of a grungy world, like
yeah.
Planet of the Apes. It was actually based on a French sci-fi novel,
Hmm.
and the French sci-fi novel, the apes actually lived in a society more advanced than ours, but that would have required too much budget. So they kind of created the post-apocalyptic, low-tech ape society
Ah,
because they could achieve that.
hmm, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, they needed to spend the money on the makeup.
Yeah. Not to get into too much of a tangent on a different movie, but the
Right.
makeup in those movies was impressive. It got less impressive with each movie. They're
Yeah.
pointing out that if you look in the background, first movie, everybody's in the makeup. Second movie, if you look at the crowd scenes, there's a lot of scenes where someone's just wearing one of the ape masks.
Yeah.
And it just went downhill from there.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what? Again, I would say this is a decent watch. There's a reason why Mad Max is known all these years later, but it isn't like a Star Wars or a Terminator where people gush about it as one of the greatest movies of all time. It's just a very distinctive, pretty good movie
Yeah.
and memorable in its own way.
Yeah.
Now the question is, speaking of sandy sci-fi adventures,
Yes. Yes. So my solo review for the week, I went ahead and watched Dune Part Deux, which
pretty
dropped
fancy.
on, yes, dropped on Max last week, um, and it's uh, if you've seen the other versions of Dune, like the David Lynch version or the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries. There are some similarities there, but they did alter a few things here and there. There were definitely some certain creative choices that I thought were interesting. So if you don't know anything about the story of Dune, Dune is a very dense story. Like
Yeah,
it's
I picked up the audiobook a while back to listen to at some point.
yeah,
I haven't gotten there yet because the book itself, I want to say,
that's a really long. It's the audiobook is really long. It's like 20 hours, isn't it? 30
uh,
hours.
da, 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 going through my Audible library here. Masashi, which I also picked up at some point, is 53 hours. So I haven't made that commitment yet.
Yeah,
Let's see here. Dune.
but yeah, it's there are a lot of themes in it. You had like
Yeah, 21 hours.
21 hours. Okay, yeah, yeah. It's long. It's long and it's very dense. So like it deals with so many different themes from like personal themes like family and different relationships, but then you got like political stuff, you've got religious stuff, you've got environmental stuff. um, this movie decided to focus heavily on the religious part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, the movie picks up where part one left off. Part one left off with Paul killing James in the little duel that he had to do, that Paul had to do to get in with the Fremen, who are the natives of Arrakis. And of course, Arrakis is a very important planet because it's the only planet in the universe that has the spice which this empire needs for their space travel. Um, and so Paul and his mother Jessica, and Jessica, by the way, is pregnant, um, and with Paul's sister. And so they go to the Fremen siege, which is led by Stilgar, and Stilgar is played by Javier Bardem, and Stilgar is a uh, very religious Fremen. Like, he believes in the Fremen believe this prophecy that that this Messiah, the Mahdi, as they call him, uh, is going to come to liberate the Fremen from the rule of the Harkonnen, who are the bad evil house that in the first movie they killed Paul's family, killed his dad, and you know wiped out his whole house. And he's going to liberate the Fremen from the Harkonnen, and he's going to change the face of Arrakis. And by that, it's what the Fremen have all these like storages, basically storage of water. Like, they have all these
Hmm.
water stores all over the planet, and they think that Paul will be able to use the water to turn Arrakis from a desert planet into like a paradise, like an oasis planet. Um, and slight spoiler, he actually does that, but when he does that, though, it causes a lot of other issues later on.
Well, you mean to
Which,
tell me that completely disrupting the natural environment is going to cause problems?
yeah.
Have they thought about, wait, where will we get spice if we drown the worms?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. They what they didn't reveal in this movie, they did it in the I think they did it in the David Lynch version, and they did it in the sci-fi miniseries, which was that the worms are the source of the spice.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think, and they didn't reveal that in either of the in these movies yet. That revelation hadn't come
Really?
yet. Yeah.
Huh,
Um,
even I, a guy who my only exposure to it is years of memes uh, and the first movie, I just knew that by cultural osmosis. So I guess I just assumed it had come up in the first movie.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Yeah, which is kind of interesting that I'm sure it's gonna. I'm sure it'll probably come up in the third movie. But and then the other thing too that they didn't mention was a bit of a controversial thing with the first movie was they race and gender swapped one of the characters, Liet Kynes. Um, and at the time, I thought that they gender swapped the character because Liet Kynes was was like Stilgar. She wanted to, she had the wanted to change Arrakis, and I thought that they gender swapped her because they were going for like a kind of like a Mother Earth symbolism sort of thing.
Okay.
But I think I gave Denis Villeneuve more credit than
Oh,
than he deserved with that, because that's it, because she is never mentioned at all in this movie. And as particularly with the fact that Liet Kynes is Chani's in this movie is Chani's mother.
hmm.
And that's why I think they did the race swap, because they probably cast Zendaya to play Chani before they cast Liet Kynes. Um, but again, I don't know that, because they didn't mention that in this movie. In fact, um, one of the negatives of this movie that everybody mentions, and I agree with it 100%, is that Zendaya is like the worst part. Um, she's just very wooden, very stilted performance. She always has this sour expression on her face. Even in the quote unquote tender moments that she has with Paul, like I never got the sense that the two of them even really liked each other all that much.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting where it's like some creators have like, oh, well, the original story of this love interest thing, I guess I will include it out of obligation, but it's clear that the two characters don't like each other.
Yeah, 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 it's almost meaningless. And but yeah, so then as the story progresses, Paul becomes this, people start believing that he is this prophesied Messiah. And one of the things that they really harp on is the fact that this whole prophecy that the Fremen believe is actually a construction of the Bene Gesserit, which are they're kind of like
Oh.
they're like witches. They're kind of like the Jedi of this universe. Um, they they uh, they created this myth, this prophecy as a method of controlling the Fremen. Um, and but despite that, Paul still uses it to his advantage because he needs this army of Fremen so that he can go after the Harkonnen and go after the Emperor, because the Emperor
Hmm.
was involved in his father being killed. Um, and the Emperor is played by Christopher Walken. Um, and uh,
I saw his name up there on the poster, and I was thinking to myself, who did he play?
Yeah, he's not in it that much. But but there is a scene where he's like, who is this Muad'Dib, and why can't we stop him from disrupting spice production? I'm exaggerating, but
He,
it's kind of like that.
he was very Walken-esque in that one,
It kind of, yeah.
in that moment, or
Yes,
somewhat Walken-esque.
somewhat Walken-esque, yeah. Um, and so then and he's not the only new character. I mean, you also had his daughter Irulan, who's played by Florence Pugh. Um, and in the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, oh, by the way, the David Lynch version, Irulan is like barely in it. Um, the Sci-Fi Channel series, she has a bigger role, and there's actually like a whole subplot with her figuring out what actually happened to the Atreides family.
Mm.
And there's a little bit of that in this movie, but not that much, because most of the focus is on Paul and on what's going on Arrakis. Um, and then there's also Fade, who is the Baron's other nephew. His one nephew, Raban, is the one who is running all the stuff on Arrakis, and he's played by Dave Batista, and he's doing a really bad job. And so then Baron gets Fade to do it, and Fade's played by whatever the can't remember his name, the guy who played Elvis in Elvis.
Oh, Austin Butler.
Austin Butler, thank you. Yeah, um, and the way the Harkonnen look is very interesting. They're all bald headed and they have
Hmm.
very pale skin, which I think kind of fits with it. I actually really like that look for bad guys, because it's really like there's like a demonic look to it. That's just like, ugh. I think it fits them very well.
Right, it's uncanny.
Yeah. Um, and so then it all culminates where Paul eventually kind of rises up and shows all of the signs that he is this Mahdi, and of course with the help from his mother, who becomes the Reverend Mother, who's like all the Bene Gesserit have like people who are in these different houses in different places. So she takes over
Right,
as
they're like a kind of an influence network.
right, yeah, and she becomes the Reverend Mother for the Fremen, and she drinks what's called the water of life. And what happens when she drinks the water of life is that her baby, her daughter Alia, or her name is Alia, by the way. It's not mentioned in the movie, but that her name's Alia. She she gains full consciousness while she's still in the womb, and she's actually talking to her, and they're actually talking to each other. Which in the now that's another thing they changed, was that at the end of the movie, Jessica's still pregnant with Alia. In the Lynch version and the Sci-Fi Channel series, she was not only was Alia born, but she was like 4 or 5 years old. She was kind of about Anya Forger's age, and and she's actually the one who kills Baron Harkonnen in both of those versions,
Hmm.
or at least the Sci-Fi Channel one. Um, but in this, it's spoiler, it's Paul. Um, but yeah, so it all kind of culminates, and Paul ends up uh, ascending the movie ends with him ascending to emperor, and Erlon agrees to marry him, and Chani is very upset by this, and because she doesn't like what Paul's doing, which is counter to the other things, but you need drama, I guess. And then the other great houses refuse to accept Paul's rule, so holy war is on, and that's where the movie ends.
Okay, so it isn't a definitive ending, but it's more of a sounds like it's more of a conclusion than the first movie gave us.
Right, it is. Yeah, yeah. It concluded that story, but it left it open for the further stories. Yeah.
For what's the third one called? Jihad or whatever?
Dune Messiah.
Dune Messiah. I knew it was some sort of religious terminology.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
I don't. I hope. I almost hope that they don't get into the ones written by Herbert's son, because my dad has described them to me before, and they sound weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard from other people who really liked the Frank Herbert books, that like, yeah, the later ones, the ones that his son wrote, yeah, were not they I don't know if they necessarily consider them canon.
Mm.
Yeah. So
It's like a Boruto situation.
yeah, yes.
To bring in another random weeby net reference.
Yeah. But I mean, I will say, when paired with the first movie, they're both really good. I think overall they're fine movies. I think they're decent adaptations. I don't know if they're necessarily the best adaptation. I don't know if it's necessarily the best adaptation.
Hmm.
I mean, I think the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, I think, probably told more of the story than this movie, because there were definitely elements in that were not in this one. Although there is one thing though in the miniseries that wasn't in here that I'm glad they left out, because it was like, I don't. But
Was it something kind of gross?
no, it wasn't gross. It's just really awful and tragic.
Hmm.
Um, but the thing with the Sci-Fi Channel one was that it was super low budget. Um,
Hmm. Which makes sense for a sci-fi original.
right, yeah. But no, um, I definitely recommend both. Both of these movies. I think they're fine. I think the uh, Timothy Chalamet, I thought actually did a decent job as Paul. He definitely walked that fine line between revolutionary leader and psychotic, power mad guy. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's you know, and I'll be interested to see once his sister comes along, because his sister, yeah, Alia is a very interesting character, to say the least, and in the and Anya Taylor Joy, who's of course we mentioned in with Furiosa, she
Mhm.
plays Alia, so it should be interesting to see. But yeah, they're both movies are on Max, so yeah,
All right. If you don't mind some ads, you can sign up for $10 today and give them a watch.
indeed, yeah,
Um, yeah. I mean, this is on my list too. I keep meaning to watch it with my dad as the main thing, and we keep it. This thing's like what, about 3 hours long, like the first one.
yeah, thereabouts, yeah,
Yeah. So it's hard to come up with a block of time where I can go with my dad to a movie or stream a movie and not leave my mom out
yeah, yeah,
for 3 hours.
yeah, yeah.
Trying to think of a transition here. Speaking of abandoned family members and holy wars,
Yeah, yeah.
That's as good as you're going to get for Jujutsu Kaisen 0.
Yeah.
So, Daniel, have you ever seen Jujutsu Kaisen, the anime?
I have not. No, this
So
was
this
my
is your
first.
first exposure to it.
Yes, yes.
So I have seen the first season, but what I will say about it is my memory of details is extremely full of holes.
Mm,
And the reason for this is that at least the way Mappa, the animation studio Mappa, recreates this show, is that it comes across as very bombastic and high energy and dumb.
mm.
Is the way I would describe it. Like I've said before about some scenes in the first season, I have never been so gleeful to have my intelligence tilted before. Uh, but this movie is kind of a unique animal because before the series proper came out, this is kind of a prequel, but with a different cast of focus characters.
Okay. I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah, because of the way that the first season worked, you have actually, but just by watching this, you have not met the main cast
Mm.
outside of outside of why am I straight? Outside of Gojo.
Okay.
Gojo is kind of the through line because he's the teacher at at the high school.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, so Jujutsu Kaisen, it's a Shonen Jump battle manga with a bent towards the horror.
Yeah, that's a good way of phrasing it. Yeah.
And where say Demon Slayer has its horrific elements, the heroes are all human. In this one, it's about people using horrific powers against more horrific beings.
Yes. Yeah. We in the beginning of the movie we meet Yuta,
Yep.
and he's a high schooler who's getting bullied. But whenever he's getting bullied or something bad happens, this cursed girl who's become this like monster being named Rita pops out and you know kills the bullies.
Funny thing is, I watched this in
Rika.
Japanese like I did originally.
Yeah.
And then I decided to watch some of it in dub just to test some things out. The bully in the first scene had kind of dark skin, but I kind of got the impression it was like the male version of a Gyaru where he just had a very thick spray tan or
Yeah.
something. Just because it does take place in Japan, so how many people of African descent are there really going to be?
Yeah.
The dub just outright gave him a an African American accent. Or,
Yeah.
so I thought that was kind of an amusing little thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so Yuta is he's cursed. He has the ghost of his childhood friend following him around, and she is very protective of him.
Mhm.
And so Yuta is just very depressed about this because it's his constant presence in his life that he can't. He just he has to worry all the time about it, freaking out and killing everybody. So he wants to die, but Gojo, the teacher at the high school, is not going to have that.
No, he convinces the people, the overseers of his school, to let him take Yuta on as a student, and Yuta reluctantly agrees. And from there, that's when Yuta meets his classmates, very eclectic classmates.
Yes, one of them is literally just Panda, who is a kind of a homunculus type thing, I believe. It's just
Yeah.
just a panda that is sapient and has magical fighting powers.
Yes, and then we had uh, what's the girl's name?
Maki.
Maki. Yeah, how did you describe her before when we were talking before the show?
Um, well, I won't say the exact phrase, but she is pure, concentrated tsundere.
Yes.
To paraphrase Dune, We have tsunderes here that even God himself has not seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where she just has like a very heavy chip in her shoulder, and she's skilled with her bladed staff.
Yes, and then last but not least, and I don't know why I'm blanking on his name too.
Toge. I cheated
Toge.
and I brought up a character list before I started.
Okay, yeah, Toge. Toge is probably my favorite character in the movie. He his curse power involves his voice, and so he can't say words without cursing people. So he communicates through rice bowl ingredients.
It's like if he says real words, the real words carry meaning. But if he just says salmon roe, then
Yeah,
the curse doesn't know what to do with that.
yeah. Binto leaves.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
And so it's kind of interesting that because this feels a little bit episodic, which is strange for a movie. Makes more sense when you realize it was originally a 4-chapter manga.
yeah,
Because first one is the introductory chapter, then him, with some training scenes. Then you have him and Toge go invest. No. Then you have him and Maki go investigate a curse at a school,
yeah,
where you kind of get a sense of of first off the weirdness of these ghosts, but also the just how dangerous these things are because they get swallowed by a giant one that's also eaten some kids who are slowly being cursed to death.
yeah, yeah. And then Yuta calls Rika up, and then Rika just tears that giant cursed ghost up,
Yeah,
and
Yuta is interesting because he is the most powerful of the main cast by a long shot,
yeah,
but he of course hates his powers because it, it's ruined his life.
yeah,
It, when he meets Gojo, Gojo pulls out this knife that's been tied in a literal, like just about a bow. He says, "Well, what's this? It was a knife. I tried to kill myself, but Rika wouldn't let me."
yeah,
It's very reminiscent of I swallowed a bullet, the other guy spat it out from Bruce
yeah,
Banner.
yeah, yeah,
But so then Yuta and Toge go to this mall where they run into a ghost that is well outside of the parameters expected.
yes, yeah, and the way Toge's powers works is that he uses the curse with his voice, but then it damages his vocal cords, so he has to have like this throat medication to like you know get some moisture in there.
Yeah, and to bring up another Marvel reference with that, he's very reminiscent of Black Bolt, who couldn't really speak without causing sonic blasts that would smash everything around him.
Right. Yeah.
Black Bolt is kind of an instant win button for a lot of scenarios in the Marvel universe when you get down to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then but then they find out that that the whole thing was caused by the movie's villain. And again, I'm blinking on his name.
His name is Suguru Geto.
Suguru Gato. Yeah.
Yeah, and Geto is kind of the Japanese sorcerer version of Magneto, who believes
Yes.
in Jujutsu sorcerer supremacy.
Yes. Yeah. He refers to humans as monkeys.
Hmm.
And he wants to you know cleanse the entire world of humans, and he wants Yuta and Rika to join him, or he wants Yuta to he asks Yuta to join him, but he turns him down, and then so he's like, well, I'll just kill him and absorb Rika.
Right, because he kind of is, to bring in another manga reference, he's a bit like All for One from My Hero Academia, where instead of collecting powerful superpowers, he collects powerful curses.
Yeah.
And he actually has a nice little scam going where he helps somebody out, then he just siphons the money off of them until they're not useful to him anymore. Then he just tosses them out.
Yeah.
Like, yep, I cured your cured your curse. Where's the money?
Yeah. Yeah. He's a very much a like uh he'll kill you with a smile on his face.
Yeah, he's a creepy bastard
Yeah.
when you get down to it.
Yes. Yeah.
And so then
Um,
the climax of the movie is Geto uses his followers as kind of a distraction while he attacks the school to take out try to take out Yuta and Rika.
yeah,
But his teammates stuck around, so it's a big group fight.
yeah. Um, and Yuta finally kind of like embraces Rika, and they go in this prolonged fights, and earlier in the movie, Yuta kind of has uh, uh, a thought that oh well, maybe I didn't or maybe she didn't curse me, or I maybe I cursed her. And then once the whole fight goes through and everything, that's when he realizes, oh yeah, that was the case.
Right? Because she had died in front of him when they were kids, and he had thought that she refused to give him up, and so was his basically clingy girlfriend forever.
Yeah.
Um, and by the way, she's this horrible eyeless monster here
Yes.
half the time. It turned out that his intense desire not to lose her is what cursed her and bound her to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so that by the end of it all, he's able to lift that curse, and then let her go off to the afterlife. And uh uh and then you had this other scene where you find out Gojo, and oh God, you just said it is his name, the bad guy,
Oh,
Getaro.
Getro,
Getaro.
Geto,
Getaro.
Geto.
Geto. Geto. Yeah, Gojo and Geto were actually friends at one time.
So keep making the Magneto and Professor X parallels even more noticeable.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, because they had the whole like, well, are you Gojo because of your powers, or is your powers because of Gojo, something like that. I
Right,
can't, it was,
right. That phrase you just said there is an endless meme with people who are familiar with the series, where it's like, are you X because you're Y, or are you Y because you're X?
yeah,
It's like in this, yeah, it's like, are you strong because you're Gojo, or are you Gojo because you're strong?
yeah,
Which seems pseudo philosophical, but that very much fits the character's. The character basically has like what I'll call a edgy boy mentality. Like
hmm,
it's um it's a such a common trope of Japanese villainry where you just have somebody who the world is full of weak and awful people, so I'm going to reboot it.
yeah,
I would say that if I have a flaw, or if I have a critique of this movie, is that they don't really explain what his issue is, like like what his inciting incident was, and that was the case in what I read of the manga too,
mm,
because it's not like Magneto, excellent reason to be the way that he is.
yeah, yeah, World War II, yeah, prison camp, yeah,
Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII, you understand his thought process.
hmm,
Since he discovered that his mother had been tortured for a very long period of time and that he wasn't strictly speaking human or entirely human.
yeah, or even Thanos, to an extent, because he doesn't necessarily want to reset the world, because he wants to wipe out half of the universe, and it's because of what happened to his homeworld.
Right. And a villain who's out for that sort of galactic reset seems to me that you kind of need more than that. It
Yeah,
also kind of ignores the fact that, wait, aren't the curses and ghosts generated by human misery and stuff? Aren't you kind of cutting off the source of your powers there?
yeah,
I would also say that sorcerers aren't like a distinctive class where it necessarily makes sense to treat them separately. Like I would think that he would want a society of cattle for him to feast on,
yeah,
but he doesn't.
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. What's the line from Tony Stark in Avengers? Not a great plan.
yeah. So what I'll say here is that oh, by the way, I looked it up because I couldn't recall. I don't think I saw that far into the series. Yuta does return in the future.
Okay.
I don't know. Like, I mean, presumably he no longer has his powers that he was pulling off of Rika, but I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But so I'll say this as a one-shot adventure. This was pretty satisfying.
Yeah.
All the characters are, they serve their purposes. Um, having watched chunks of the Japanese, or having watched it entirely in Japanese once when it came out in theaters, and again this weekend, uh, and a bit in smatterings of the English dub, I just kind of skipped around particular scenes I wanted to check out. Uh, I would say the Japanese cast is better. That might be my primacy bias, what I saw first.
Yeah.
Because there are just certain Japanese voice acting styles that there isn't really an equivalent of in English that are kind of interesting. Like Gojo has this very sort of sing-songy, happy-go-lucky tone that just doesn't exist in English.
Mm. Yeah.
As far as production values go, very well animated, very exciting action scenes.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought the whole the battle scene in Tokyo was really well done.
Interesting thing there. So Daniel wouldn't have known this, and I just double checked the manga. But thank you, Shonen Jump app. So I had thought to myself at the time I was watching it, wait, this is a prequel. So why are there all these characters who were introduced in the first season of the anime there? Well, most of the fight in Tokyo, that was the distraction so that Geto could go try to capture Yuta, actually happened off camera. Gojo's part of the fight happened on camera against one of the minions, but the other battles that they threw in were made up for the movie, and they introduced the characters who were logically active but not you know conceived of by the creator yet.
Yeah.
So that was a nice little treat for those of us who had seen the first season, just to see some characters doing their thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it this is kind of an interesting piece of media too, because I can't think of another example outside of Star Trek where you have a prequel like this that exists that has an entirely different cast, or significantly different cast than the final version, I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Spock was the commonality with, as I recall, with the original Star Trek pilot in the final series, and Gojo, the teacher, is the common element there
Yeah. Yeah.
as far as the recurring main characters.
Yes, that's yeah, a good comparison there. Yeah.
So now, from what I've heard, the series doesn't necessarily go in great directions.
Mm.
That's neither here nor there. Just as a standalone movie, this is a totally fine experience, and just because it is a complete story, but it's also canon for the original series, it actually makes it good a good sample point for people to see if they would be interested in watching the show itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that, and yeah, I may start watching the series at some point. Yeah. On either Netflix or Crunchyroll, one of the two.
Yeah, Sony is kind of doing the Warner Brothers thing and going, "Can we get some of that Netflix money?
Yeah.
Y'all get those licensing fees."
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're trying to think if there's anything else that. Nope, it's just a solid time. Although not for the kiddies.
Oh no, no.
Like if I was going to do mainline shonen series, My Hero Academia is probably the most for the kiddies. So outside of some kind of amazing, egregious fan service
Yeah, yeah,
places. Then Demon Slayer has quite a bit of blood and violence and stuff, but I could see like a 10-year-old handling it if they're they aren't squicked out by that.
Yeah.
This one is firmly for teens just because of the content.
Yeah, I would go like 15 maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not because it's like heady concept matter, it's just very edgy.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Well, yeah. I think we've said all we need to say for tonight.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always.
Indeed.
Yeah. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next week. Bye,
Yep.
everybody.
Night, everyone.